February 4th, 2020, 6:15 in the morning. A corrections officer at Ionia Maximum Security Prison in Michigan walks down cell block D for the routine head count. Cell 47, cell 48, cell 49. He stops. Cell 50 is empty. The bed is made. Personal items are still there. But the inmate, a convicted murderer serving life without parole, is gone. Within minutes, alarms are blaring through the entire facility. Every cell is being checked. Every door, every window, every possible exit point. Guards are scrambling. The warden is on the phone with state police. A convicted murderer has vanished from inside one of Michigan's most secure facilities. No forced locks, no broken windows, no signs of a struggle. Just gone. But here's what nobody expected. Here's what made this case explode across every news channel in America. The person who helped him wasn't a hardened criminal, wasn't part of some elaborate criminal network, wasn't a corrupt guard who got paid off. It was the one person who swore in court under oath that she wanted nothing to do with him ever again. The one person who testified against him in a murder trial. The one person who helped put him behind bars for life. His ex-wife. This is the true story of obsession, manipulation, betrayal, and a relationship so toxic it destroyed everything in its path. A story about how the past never really lets go, about how fear can make us do the unthinkable, and about a woman who had to choose between her freedom and her children's lives. I'm going to tell you everything, but I need to warn you. This story doesn't go where you think it's going, and by the end, you'll be asking yourself a question that doesn't have an easy answer. Before we go any further, let me lay out the central mysteries of this case, because this isn't just a story about a prison escape. It's so much more than that. Question 1. How does an ex-wife, a woman who divorced her husband, changed her name, moved to a different city, and rebuilt her entire life, how does she go from that to masterminding a prison break? Question 2. Why would she risk everything? Her freedom, her career, her relationship with her children. Why would she help the man who abused her, the man she once testified against in a murder trial? Question 3. Was this about love? Was it obsession? Or was there something else happening behind the scenes that nobody saw coming? And question 4. The one that haunts me the most. When the FBI finally caught up to them 3 weeks later, when they arrested both of them in that motel parking lot outside Memphis, when they put them in separate interrogation rooms and asked them why, their answers were completely different. Completely. One of them was lying. But which one? Here's what I can tell you right now. The FBI investigation that followed uncovered phone records, prison visitation logs, coded letters, financial transactions, and a timeline of planning that went back almost 2 years. 2 years of secret meetings, 2 years of preparation, 2 years of lies. And at the center of it all was a woman named Sarah Mitchell. A dental hygienist, a soccer mom, someone you'd pass at the grocery store and never think twice about. But to understand why she did what she did, to understand how an ordinary woman becomes part of one of the most shocking prison escapes in Michigan's history, we need to go back to where it all began, back to when she was still Sarah Johnson, back to when she first met the man who would change her life.
Muskegon, Michigan, 2005. A city on the shores of Lake Michigan with about 38,000 residents. Working class, family-oriented, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Sarah Mitchell, back then she was Sarah Parker, was 23 years old, She just graduated from dental hygiene school. She was starting her first real job at a family dental practice downtown. She was dating casually, living with 2 roommates, spending weekends at Lake Michigan beaches with friends. By all accounts, Sarah was happy. She was close with her family. Her parents still lived in Muskegon. Her younger sister was in college. She went to church most Sundays. She volunteered at a local animal shelter. Friends described her as kind, maybe a little naive, someone who always saw the best in people. And then, in July 2005, one of her friends invited her to a 4th of July barbecue. That's where she met Michael Johnson. Michael was 26, tall, athletic, good-looking. He'd played football in high school, worked construction, had that blue-collar charm that a lot of people found appealing. He was the kind of guy who could walk into a room and immediately start conversations. Charismatic, funny, confident. Sarah's friend later said she remembers the exact moment they met. Michael was flipping burgers at the grill, and Sarah walked over to grab a drink from the cooler. He said something that made her laugh. Within 10 minutes, they were deep in conversation. By the end of the night, Michael had asked for her number. By the end of the week, they'd been on 3 dates. By the end of the month, they were inseparable. Sarah's friends were happy for her. Her parents liked Michael. He was polite. He had a job. He talked about wanting to settle down and start a family. He seemed stable. 6 months later, on New Year's Eve 2005, Michael proposed. Sarah said yes without hesitation. They got married in April 2006. Small wedding, mostly family and close friends. They moved into a rental house on the west side of Muskegon. Sarah kept working at the dental practice. Michael was pulling good money from construction jobs. In 2007, their daughter Emma was born. 2 years later, their son Tyler. From the outside, they looked like the perfect young family. Birthday parties, soccer games, Halloween costumes, Christmas cards with professional photos. But inside that house, something was changing. Sarah's best friend, Jennifer, later told investigators that she started noticing changes around 2009. Small things at first. Sarah stopped showing up to their weekly coffee dates. When Jennifer would call, she would say she was too busy, too tired, the kids were sick. Valid excuses on their own, but they kept coming. When they did meet up, Jennifer noticed Sarah was more withdrawn, quieter. She'd check her phone constantly. If Michael called, she'd answer immediately and step away to talk privately. Other friends noticed too. Sarah stopped posting on Facebook as much. She declined invitations to girls' night out. She made excuses not to attend birthday parties or gatherings. Her sister, Amy, said Sarah seemed anxious all the time, jumpy, like she was always waiting for something bad to happen. But nobody understood what was really going on, because Sarah wasn't telling anyone. She was hiding it, and she was getting very good at hiding it. Michael's temper had always been there, but it was getting worse. He'd get angry over small things, dinner not being ready on time, the house not being clean enough, Sarah talking to male coworkers at the dental office. The arguments started escalating. What began as yelling turned into things being thrown, doors slammed, walls punched. Sarah told her therapist, years later, that the first time Michael hit her was in November 2010. They'd been arguing about money. Michael had lost his construction job and was drinking more. Sarah suggested he look for work. He backhanded her across the face. She was so shocked she didn't even react. He immediately apologized, cried, said he'd never do it again, blamed the alcohol, blamed the stress, said he loved her more than anything. Sarah believed him, or wanted to believe him, because she had 2 young children, because divorce felt like failure, because part of her still remembered the man she'd fallen in love with at that barbecue. But it happened again, and again, and again. By 2011, the physical abuse was regular. Sarah had learned to cover the bruises with makeup. She'd wear long sleeves in summer. She'd cancel plans if the marks were too visible. She thought about leaving, but Michael seemed to always know what she was thinking. He'd tell her that if she ever left, she'd never see her kids again. He'd tell her no court would believe her. He'd tell her that if she told anyone, he'd kill her. And Sarah believed him, because by that point she'd seen what Michael was capable of when he was angry. But what Sarah didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Michael's violence wasn't limited to their home.
December 8th, 2011, a Thursday night, around 10:30 p.m. The Marathon gas station on Getty Street in Muskegon. It's a small station, open 24 hours, usually quiet after 10 p.m. Working that night was David Martinez, 52 years old, a father of 3. He'd worked at that gas station for 7 years. Everybody in the neighborhood knew David. Friendly guy, always smiling. Security camera footage shows a man entering the store at 10:31 p.m. He's wearing a dark hoodie, hood up, face partially obscured. He walks around the store for a minute, grabs a bag of chips, approaches the counter. David rings him up. $1.79. The man reaches into his pocket, but instead of money, he pulls out a gun. The footage is grainy, but you can see David put his hands up. You can see him backing toward the register. You can see him opening the cash drawer. There's $217 in the register. The man takes it. For a moment, it looks like he's going to leave. David is still standing there, hands up, not moving. And then the man shoots him. Once. In the chest. David collapses behind the counter. The shooter runs out of the store. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. A customer found David's body 20 minutes later. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The bullet had pierced his heart. He likely died within seconds. The Muskegon Police Department launched a full investigation. They released the security footage to local news. They interviewed dozens of people. They followed every lead. But they couldn't identify the shooter. The footage was too dark. The hoodie covered too much. Nobody recognized the build or the walk. The case went cold. 3 months later, on March 15, 2012, something happened that would crack the case wide open. It started with a 911 call. The dispatcher's recording captures a woman's voice, shaking, barely coherent. "My husband, he hurt me. Please send someone. I can't. I need help." When Muskegon police arrived at the Johnson residence, they found Sarah in the kitchen, blood on her face, her left eye swollen shut, 3 fingers on her right hand bent at wrong angles. Later, at the hospital, doctors would document a fractured skull, a broken orbital bone, 3 broken ribs, and severe bruising across her torso. Michael was gone. He'd fled before police arrived. For the first time in 7 years of abuse, Sarah pressed charges. Maybe it was because the attack was so severe. Maybe it was because she finally realized he was going to kill her if she stayed. Maybe it was because Emma and Tyler had witnessed it. Whatever the reason, Sarah gave a statement to police. She told them everything. The years of abuse, the threats, the control. Michael was arrested 2 days later at his brother's house in Grand Rapids. He was charged with domestic violence, aggravated assault, and violation of a restraining order Sarah had filed the day after the attack. Michael made bail. He was ordered to stay away from Sarah and the children. And then, investigators made a discovery that changed everything. When they searched Michael's truck, they found a 9mm handgun hidden under the driver's seat. Ballistics tests came back within a week. The gun was a match.
It was the same weapon used to kill David Martinez 3 months earlier. Michael Johnson wasn't just an abusive husband. He was a murderer. The Muskegon County Prosecutor's Office moved quickly. They charged Michael Johnson with first-degree murder in the death of David Martinez. They also added the domestic violence charges. The case was strong, but not airtight. The security footage from the gas stations showed a man in a hoodie, but you couldn't definitively identify his face. The gun was the right caliber, but proving Michael was the one who pulled the trigger required more. The prosecution needed a witness, someone who could place Michael at the scene, someone who could testify to his state of mind, his behavior, his potential motive. They needed Sarah. Investigators approached Sarah at the hospital while she was recovering from her injuries. They asked her if Michael had said anything about the gas station shooting, if he'd acted strangely around that time, if there was anything she remembered. Sarah was terrified. She'd just testified against her husband for domestic violence. Now they wanted her to testify in a murder trial. She knew what that meant. She knew Michael would never forgive her. But she also knew that if she didn't, he might get away with it. And if he got away with it, eventually he'd get out, and eventually he'd come for her. So Sarah made the hardest decision of her life. She agreed to testify. What she told prosecutors was damning. She said that on the night of December 8, 2011, Michael had come home around 11:15 p.m. She'd been asleep on the couch. The kids were in bed. Michael's hands were shaking. He was sweating. His eyes were wild. Sarah asked him what was wrong. He told her to shut up. He went into the bathroom. She heard the shower running for almost 20 minutes. When he came out, Sarah asked again what happened. And that's when Michael told her. He said he'd robbed the gas station on Getty Street, said he needed money because they were behind on bills and he was desperate, said something went wrong, said the clerk reached for something under the counter, said he panicked and pulled the trigger. Sarah was frozen. She didn't know what to say. Michael grabbed her by the shoulders and told her if she ever told anyone, ever, he would kill her and the children. She believed him. For 3 months, Sarah carried that secret. She lived with a murderer. She slept next to him every night knowing he'd killed an innocent man over $217. And now, she was going to tell the world. The trial began in September 2012. The media coverage was intense. A local man, a brutal murder, a domestic violence survivor forced to testify against her husband. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. They presented the security footage, the ballistics report matching the gun to the murder, financial records showing Michael had gambling debts and was desperate for money. And then they called Sarah Johnson to the stand. Court transcripts describe her as visibly shaking as she took the oath. She wouldn't look at Michael. Her voice was so quiet, the judge asked her twice to speak up. The prosecutor walked her through that night, March 15, 2012, the attack that put her in the hospital. Then, carefully, they asked about December 8, 2011. Sarah took a deep breath, and she told the courtroom everything Michael had said that night. The confession, the details, the threat. Michael's defense attorney tried to break her testimony. They suggested she was lying to get revenge. They suggested she was an unreliable witness who'd been traumatized and was misremembering. They suggested she was trying to protect herself by blaming her husband. But Sarah didn't break. She answered every question. She maintained her testimony. And when the defense attorney asked her, "Mrs. Johnson, are you absolutely certain your husband confessed to this murder?" Sarah looked him directly in the eyes and said, "Yes, I am certain, because I've had to live with that knowledge every day for 9 months."
The defense presented their case. They argued the confession was hearsay. They argued Sarah had motivation to lie. They argued the gun could have been planted. But it wasn't enough. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 17 minutes. When they returned, the verdict was read. Guilty, first-degree murder, guilty on all counts of domestic violence and assault. Michael Johnson showed no emotion. Sarah, sitting in the back of the courtroom, broke down crying. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Michael Johnson, age 33, would spend the rest of his life behind bars.
3 months after the sentencing, Sarah filed for divorce. She told the judge she wanted no contact with Michael Johnson. She wanted to erase every trace of him from her life. The divorce was granted. Sarah changed her name back to Sarah Mitchell, her maiden name. She got sole custody of Emma and Tyler. Michael's parental rights were terminated. Sarah sold the house where the abuse had happened. She moved to a smaller apartment across town. She kept working at the dental practice, though her coworkers said she was different now, quieter, more distant. She started seeing a therapist. She joined a support group for domestic violence survivors. She focused on her children. Emma was 5, Tyler was 3. They were too young to fully understand what had happened, but old enough to know their father was gone. Sarah's parents and sister helped with child care. Friends checked in regularly. Slowly, painfully, Sarah started rebuilding. She didn't date. She didn't talk about Michael. When Emma or Tyler asked about their father, she gave simple answers. Daddy made some bad choices. He's in a place where people go when they break the law. By 2015, Sarah seemed to be doing better. She was smiling more. She attended Emma's school events. She took the kids to the beach on weekends. She posted occasional photos on Facebook, birthday parties, Halloween costumes, first days of school. Her therapist noted in records that Sarah was making significant progress. She was sleeping better. She was less anxious. She was starting to talk about the future instead of just surviving the present. For 8 years, from 2012 to 2018, Sarah Mitchell had no contact with Michael Johnson. She didn't visit him in prison. She didn't write letters. She didn't ask about him. As far as anyone knew, she'd completely moved on. But then, in October 2018, something changed. Something that nobody saw coming, something that would set in motion a chain of events leading to one of the most shocking prison escapes in Michigan history. Prison records show that on October 15, 2018, Sarah Mitchell filled out a visitor application for Ionia Correctional Facility. She wanted to see Michael Johnson. The question is, why? Before we continue, I need to pause here for a second because this is where the story takes a turn that I still can't fully wrap my head around. If you're still with me at this point, if you're following this story and you want to know what happens next, do me a favor, drop a comment right now with your state, just your state, nothing else. I want to see where everyone's watching from, and I promise you, I read every comment. Because what happens next, what Sarah and Michael planned over the next 14 months, is going to blow your mind. All right, let's continue.
October 23rd, 2018. Sarah Mitchell walked into Ionia Correctional Facility for the first time in 6 years. The visit lasted 47 minutes. What they talked about, we don't know. Visiting rooms don't have audio recording. Over the next year, Sarah visited 14 times. She started calling Michael 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week. All inmate phone calls are recorded, but nobody was listening in real time. After the escape, FBI investigators went through every call, every letter. What they found painted a disturbing picture.
coded language about vacation plans and work projects, instructions hidden in seemingly innocent letters, references to dates, times, locations. For 14 months, Sarah and Michael had been planning his escape. But the FBI kept coming back to the same question. Why? Why would Sarah risk everything? The answer came during Sarah's interrogation after her arrest, and it shattered everyone's assumptions about this case. Sarah told investigators that in September 2018, she received a letter, not from Michael, from someone on the outside, someone Michael knew from before prison. The letter contained 3 photographs of her children: Emma at soccer practice, Tyler leaving school, both of them playing in their front yard. The message was clear. Michael had people watching her children. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a phone call on a Sunday afternoon. A man's voice she didn't recognize. He said Michael wanted to talk to her. He said Michael had friends who knew where her kids went to school, what time they got home, where they played. He said if Sarah didn't start visiting Michael in prison, if she didn't do exactly what Michael asked, her children would disappear. Sarah was frozen with the same fear she'd felt during her marriage. She thought about going to the police, but the caller had anticipated that. Michael says if you involve police, you'll never see your kids alive again. He says he knows he keeps his promises. And Sarah did know. She'd lived with his violence for years. She'd seen what he was capable of. She knew he meant it. So she went to the prison. And that first visit, Michael laid it out for her. He had people on the outside, associates from his construction days, people with criminal connections. They were watching Emma and Tyler. If Sarah helped him escape, he'd leave the state, leave Michigan, and she'd never hear from him again. His people would leave her children alone. But if she refused, if she went to the police, if she did anything except exactly what he told her to do, her children would pay the price. For 14 months, Sarah lived in terror. She went through the motions, visiting, calling, following his coded instructions. She purchased supplies, she rented the car, she planned the pickup location. All while her children had no idea they were being watched. February 4th, 2020, Sarah dropped Emma and Tyler at her sister's house and drove to that motel. At 12:03 a.m., she picked up Michael from the prison perimeter just as planned. But Sarah had made one decision Michael didn't know about. Before she left her sister's house that night, she'd hidden a note in Amy's mailbox. The note said, "If anything happens to me, Michael forced me to help him escape. He threatened Emma and Tyler. I'm going to drive him as far as I need to, and then I'm going to the police. Tell the kids I love them."
Sarah drove Michael for 6 hours. They crossed into Indiana, then Kentucky. Michael thought they were heading to Tennessee, then further south. He talked about Mexico, about disappearing, about how smart he'd been to manipulate her back into his control. But at a rest stop outside Louisville, while Michael was in the bathroom, Sarah made a decision. She called 911. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm traveling with an escaped prisoner named Michael Johnson. He forced me to help him by threatening my children. We're at the rest stop on I-65, mile marker 137. I'm in a silver Toyota Camry. Please send police. Please make sure my children are safe." State police arrived within 12 minutes. They found Michael walking back to the car. He tried to run. He didn't make it 20 feet before officers tackled him to the ground. Sarah was sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the steering wheel, crying. FBI investigators immediately moved to protect Emma and Tyler. They identified and arrested 2 men in Muskegon who had been photographing Sarah's children. Both had criminal records and connections to Michael from years earlier.
With Michael's associates in custody and Michael himself back behind bars, the threat was over. Sarah was arrested and charged with aiding an escape. Her attorney argued she'd acted under extreme duress, that she'd been a victim of continued coercion and had self-reported the moment she felt her children were safe. The prosecution acknowledged Sarah had ultimately cooperated, potentially preventing Michael from committing further crimes. In a plea agreement, Sarah was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with credit for time served and eligibility for early release. Michael Johnson received an additional 30 years on top of his life sentence for escape and criminal conspiracy. He'll never be eligible for parole. He'll die in prison. Sarah Mitchell is free. Finally. Truly free. And sometimes, that's the only ending that matters.
If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. I cover true crime cases like this every week. Stories that go deeper than the headlines. Stories that make you question everything you thought you knew. And drop a comment below. Do you think Sarah made the right choice? Should she have gone to the police immediately? Or did she do what any mother would do to protect her children? I want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.